Welcome to Feel Safe in Your Body. I'm Victor Goenka. My guest today is Sherry, a peer support coach and author who works from lived experience. For much of her life, she was in survival mode without even knowing it. Childhood adversity, trauma, single parenting, one challenge after another. All of it shaping how she coped and how she showed up. And then came the realization that changed everything. The patterns she'd carried, the people pleasing, the fixing everyone, the need for control weren't personal flaws. They were nervous system adaptations, things her body built to keep her safe. That single shift from flaw to adaptation is what we're going to get into today. One arc, like always, where she started, what wired her, what turned it, and what safety feels like now. Let's go. Welcome, Sherry.
Thank you for having me.
You said for much of your life you lived in survival mode without even realizing it. Take me back to that moment. What did survival mode actually feel like day to day when you didn't yet know that's what it was?
Survival mode for me looked like a high functioning person. So I kept busy. I was raising my son as a single parent. I volunteered for the sports that he was in. That was hockey, soccer, judo, baseball. And held a full time job as well while doing it and then put myself through college. So from the outside, people would have thought, she's high functioning. She has it all together. And many times people would ask me, how do you do it? You're going to college, you're raising a child by yourself, and you just seem like everything's together. And I said, that's just what you do as a parent. I always was putting other people's needs before my own needs. So often I wasn't realizing that if I would have slowed down, I would have realized that I was probably dying on the inside, that there was anxiety within me, there was stressors. And to me, you just didn't deal with those. I also faced cancer when my son was young and had to deal with that, the loss of loved ones. And to me, you just dealt with it. You had a child that you needed to show up for. So that was a priority for me. So for survival, I just put that smile on and continued to do what I knew best, which was please everyone else and worry about myself last. And it wasn't until my son, was older, he was 18, went off to university, that my body actually came out of fight or flight and realized, wow, this is what survival looks like. You don't deal with anything. You don't process emotions, you don't process loss, you don't process grief, you don't process trauma. You just push through. And that's kind of when I realized, okay, now a healing journey needs to begin.
And as you were a single parent through a lot of this, carrying everything, what was your body holding in those years that you didn't have language for?
Probably anxiety and fight or flight, anger, which I didn't really necessarily notice. I figured it was just natural for me to sometimes have a sharp tongue or fly off the handle easy. And I just was always taught, well, that's just who you are. That's part of your personality. And over time, I realized that wasn't my personality. That wasn't who I was, but it's what my body held because it didn't know any other way or response other than to stay anxious, to stay busy, and to stay in fight or flight.
And let's name the patterns that you carried: people pleasing, fixing others, overfunctioning, needing control. From the outside, those can look like being helpful, being capable, like you're on top of things. What were they really doing for your nervous system?
They were destroying me. They were making me feel dead inside, like my emotions, my feelings, none of it ever mattered. And I think back now and I'm like, well, the reason it didn't feel mattered is I never got validated. I was validating everyone else when no one was validating myself. And I needed to look inward and start realizing you don't need validation from others. You need to validate yourself first. And it's really hard to validate yourself first and love yourself first when you are pouring into everyone else and not pouring into yourself. So in the journey, I've realized you can't love someone in any capacity correctly if you're not loving yourself and pouring into yourself first. And it's not selfish to put effort into yourself. And like you said, everybody looks at people pleasing and fixing as, being helpful and everything like that. But people forget how that makes somebody feel on the inside. And guilt is also another huge thing that we feel on the inside as a people pleaser. Because if we're not pleasing other people, then what are we doing? We're being selfish, or that's what we're taught. And in reality, that's not true. And that's where you need to start rewiring those patterns so that you can realize and start to let your brain realize that it is safe to put yourself first and it is safe to give up those old patterns because the anxiety that develops within yourself for me it started to form into panic attacks, like mentioned, the sharp tongue, the quick to react. And I started reacting from emotion, never reacting from a fact base. So I was always reacting with the amygdala or that alligator brain, as they say. So I realized that's not what I liked about myself. It wasn't who I truly was. And internally, it felt like day by day, I was just starting to forget who I was and die a little more inside and kind of become a shell. I disconnected and taught myself to disconnect from absolutely everything. And by doing that, it started to make me question, do I actually even care about anything anymore?
Each of those is a survival adaptation. Like it sounds like people pleasing earns safety through approval. Fixing other gives control where you have none. Over functioning, I guess, outruns the threat of what you're facing. And then control in a way quiets a system that learned that the world is quite unpredictable. So the flaw was always a strategy.
Yes. And because you're pouring from that empty cup and you start to disconnect from yourself, you also start to find or start to think, what can I do to make myself feel the way I make everybody else feel? And that can lead to unhealthy behaviors, whether that's over exercising to the point of, like you're not eating healthy, you're turning to maybe drinking a little more or being a lot of people will start to have sex outside of relationships or start going against their morals and values. And for me, when I started to get to a point where I had disconnected from everything and that people pleasing and trauma had gotten to a point where my cup was too full and I hadn't realized it, it went against morals and values because I was somebody that never really drank and started to turn to more drinking. I was somebody that never had sex outside of a relationship. To me, that is very sacred and meaningful. And I started to find myself in situationships, I guess as people call them now, or friends with benefits. And every time you do it, you feel more guilt, but you're doing it because it pleases someone else. And once you can realize that the patterns you're starting to turn to are also starting to affect your morals and values and causing you more guilt, and eventually you're going to hit a rock bottom and you're going to say, okay, like this isn't who I am. This isn't who I want to continue to be. This isn't who I want my child to see me be. How can I fix it? Where has things gone wrong in my life? And for me, it was when my son was just starting high school and we had had a big fight. And I thought to myself, like, what is going on? What is it that has caused me to go this far? And for my son to be always arguing with me. And I sat there that night on my bed, crying and figuring like there's got to be something better. And I just said like, "Hey universe, what do you got for me? Like if there's a god, if it's spiritual, whatever you follow, what do you got for me? Because patterns need to change." And it was like a light bulb went off and I was like, "Therapy. You need to rewire. You need to figure out what is going on in your life. What happened to you?" Because we aren't our patterns. We're often conditioned to believe that's what we are, and it's not, and it can be changed. And so from there, that's when I started the journey of like, okay, this is changeable, and started looking inwards and realizing how the people pleasing led into fixing, and that led into control, and then it led into the self-destructive behaviors. And from there, I was able to kind of put those pieces back together to get to where I am today.
And you had a moment where you saw these weren't flaws, they were adaptations. What was it like to realize that? What changed when something's wrong with me became my body was actually protecting me?
When I quit saying, "Why me? What is wrong with me?" and started asking, "What happened to me?" instead, and started looking at it as I wasn't born this way. And when I had that aha moment, it was it was soul refreshing, but it was also terrifying and scary because we often don't want to look at our trauma, and we don't want to look at the hurt that we cause other people when we are traumatized, because that often leads to remorse and guilt. And we often don't want to take ownership for our mistakes that we've made. And just because we've made mistakes doesn't mean we are a bad person. It means something's happened to us that we might have made poor decisions, and that doesn't need to define us. And when I started the journey, I was terrified. I thought there was absolutely no way I could get through this. I had no support. I'm not close with my family. And I thought, how do you do this alone? And I realized I do it because I love myself. And every step I took, I felt, wow, this is what I can feel like inside. This feels weird, but I think I might like it. And then something would happen in my life and I would go 10 steps back or 1,000 steps back. And then the remorse and the guilt would come. But I had the tools to be able to say, like, just because you had to step back doesn't mean you have to go all the way back. It just means, okay, there's still some things that you need to heal in that aspect of your life so that you don't take those 10 steps back. And the closer I became to where I am today, the more rewarding it felt because I was able to look at myself in the mirror and be proud of what I was looking at and be able to say, like, you deserve this. Your son deserves this. Your friends deserve this version of you. This is who you are. This is who you've been since you were that, little girl or little boy back when you were a child before anything happened. And people in my life started saying like, "Oh, you're glowing different," or "You're approaching things differently. You're thinking before you're reacting." And people started saying they noticed the change and asked me like, "What happened? Oh, what's different in your life? Oh, you must be dating again." And it's like, no, I'm choosing me and I'm loving myself authentically. And this is what it looks like when you pour into yourself as much as you pour into other people. And then I noticed how it affected my relationship with my son. And that was probably one of the most rewarding things is being able to see that he could see a mom who is messy, but also how to put it back together as well.
Can you talk about the shift from coping to healing? Those sound similar, but they're not. What's the actual difference in your experience? When did you cross from one to the other?
When you're just coping, you're often using things to fill voids. you're not actually utilizing your own brain power and the neuroplasticity of rewiring. You are, how do I explain it? It kind of, for me, coping was just kind of floating through life day to day. Your trauma was still there. Some days were great, some days were absolutely terrible. And over time, I realized, okay, when I have a setback, I find that I'm going to my old ways again and my old patterns. So obviously, I'm not healing. I'm just coping. I'm filling that void. And I would find, okay, I'm going to over exercise now. And then there was days where I wouldn't go to the gym at all. And I thought, okay, obviously I'm still coping. Nothing's healing. When I started getting to the healing portion is when I started realizing when I was working out, for example, like I'm doing this because it makes me feel good, not because I'm trying to drown out a thought that I don't want to listen to. And there was days where I would go to the gym and never listen to music while I was working out. And I'm like, I'm doing this because I really enjoy it. Days that I was coping, I was going to the gym and blaring my music and I was finding, the heavier beat music, not the softer music. And I was drowning myself in the music so I didn't have to hear myself think because with people pleasing, there's overthinking. And so you're always trying to drown that noise out. And I found during my healing, there was times that I would go home and I would sit in pure silence. And silence for me was deafening. It was not something I could sit with because in my life, life was chaos. Chaos was normal. If there wasn't chaos, that meant create it. Because if there wasn't chaos, there was going to be a storm. And when I went from coping to healing, I was able to sit in peace and eventually hear my own heartbeat while I sat there. And I was like, that's what emotional intelligence feels like. That's what healing feels like. And from there, when thoughts crept into my mind, I was able to start dealing with them and not think, my word, how do I just get rid of this thought? Okay, let's reach for a drink. Okay, let's, go work out for 2 hours to get rid of this thought. It was, okay, the thought is there, but why is it there? And for me, that was a big shift to realize, okay, I'm now actually wanting to heal this. And as that continued, I started to grow on Maslow's hierarchy of needs and started to realize I wasn't just staying at the bottom in the survival, I was getting closer to self actualization. And by reaching that, I was able to look inward a lot more and find further peace.
And you turned all of this into books, into coaching others. What did it take to transform what you survived into something you could offer other people?
I think I've always been someone that people have come to, but when I started going through my own journey, I noticed more people came to me for advice. And I work in a first responder world, and I noticed that a lot of them were starting to come and ask me questions about personal life or work related things. And then they started saying, like, you know what you're doing, you know what you're talking about. We've seen the transformation over all these years. Why aren't you helping other people? Why aren't you utilizing your tools and your specialty and just your natural ability to help others? And I never thought of putting it into a business because to me, I've always been somebody that's volunteered and love helping others. But then I realized my story can help other people. And I believe when you're truly passionate about something, share it, turn it into a business, reach as many people as you can because you don't realize how one story can change so many other lives or affect so many other lives. And through my travel, I realized that in certain countries, Canada or North America can be seen as a place of love and peace and freedom and no turmoil. So I found that I was meeting people that were often looking at me like, oh, this girl, she's never had trauma. How can she volunteer in our areas? She has no idea what she's talking about. She doesn't understand poverty. And so I thought to myself, how can I reach other demographics? and bring the world together, because just because I come from a first world country doesn't mean I don't experience adversity or other issues that are faced in other countries. And a very close friend of mine had wanted me to write a memoir about my whole story. And I thought, I'm not ready. And then I had actually bought a book in my travels, and it was from someone that had written a story about growing up in their poverty and their adversity. And I thought to myself, okay, maybe I could do a little book. And another friend had said, why don't you do a small memoir with bilingualism so that you can kind of speak to English and Spanish side, and people, even if they don't understand English, can still read it and understand it. So I thought and sat and was like, okay, yeah, you know what? This sounds good. And then one day I woke up and I was like, I need to write this book. I need to write a memoir that, speaks about my childhood, speaks about single motherhood, and my journey of how I got to today. And I did it in English and Spanish so that I could reach as many people as possible. And so that people could see it doesn't matter where you come from in the world. Everyone has a story, and everybody has a right to have their story heard without judgment. And that if I can change one person's life or change one person's thought process, my goal in life is complete.
I love that. I think that is very profound and very important. Everybody has a story to tell. Everybody has and should have a platform to be heard and to be able to share their story. How do you know in your body that you're safe right now?
I feel peace and I feel acceptance, and I feel like I can authentically be myself. And for those that don't accept me, that's okay, because we're not made for everyone, and not everyone deserves a seat at our table. And when I look at my daily life, I can't be more blessed. And gratitude was something I was never taught growing up. It was something I had to teach myself. And through my healing journey, I started realizing I am so grateful for so many things. And I've learned you need to be grateful in life, even for the traumatic things that happen to you. You don't have to be thankful that they happened to you, but be grateful for what it has taught you, which was very hard to learn. But I'm beyond blessed that I did learn it, because now I know every day that I wake up, I'm safe. I have the tools when things go wrong in my life to remind myself that doesn't define me and it doesn't set me back and it doesn't mean I'm not safe. I have the tools now to remind myself that I'm safe and keep that within me. And a lot of people, like you just asked, how do you know you're safe? For everyone, it's different. For me, I feel peace and I feel proud of who I am in a very humble way. And I'm very grateful for the life that I've been given, good, bad, ugly, and completely blessed. For other people, safety might mean having a good team, having a good support system, but it's how do you feel on the inside? Are you still feeling anxious? If you are, maybe you're not fully safe. For me, when I do get anxious, I have the tools to remind myself it's a moment in time, it's going to pass. Because overall, I still feel that peace, that contentment. And I know the people I've chosen in my life are supportive.
And when the old patterns knock, the urge to please, to fix, to control, what do you do differently than you used to?
But that's a good question. Now I sit and I ask myself, what is coming up? What is this triggering in my brain? And then when I have the urge to maybe, reach for a drink, instead it's like, no, go for a walk or read a book, listen to an inspiring song, call a friend. And a lot of it truly comes down to asking yourself again, what is this triggering? What do I need to still work with? Because no matter what, healing is not linear, and healing is a journey that continues for the rest of your life. It is not something that you're healed, Great, it never comes up again. You're always going to have setbacks. It's life. And it's a matter of reminding yourself that it's a moment in time. It is going to pass like everything else. And it is not who you are. So for me, when I have things come up, like I'm moving to Panama, that's a big change for me. So, that is often going to trigger other emotions because people are going to question you and think, what are you doing? You're taking a leave of absence from your job, you're moving away and you're selling everything. Like, what are you thinking? Are you crazy? And that brings on those negative thoughts that we might have been conditioned. And they've definitely crept in this journey. And in those moments, I sit in silence and I ask myself, where are these messages coming from? Why are these people telling me these messages? Is it something that is a reflection of them or a reflection of me? And when I realize that it's most likely a reflection of them, because what people portray is usually a reflection of them, it's not the reflection of yourself. Because a lot of people, when they're pouring out negative energy or something to you, a lot of people, like the saying goes, hold up a mirror. Because when you hold up that mirror in front of them, it's usually reflecting back to something they're lacking. So, it might be self-esteem, it might be courage, it might be fitness, it could be anything. So, when things recently have been coming out for me, I've been sitting there thinking to myself, okay, where did it come from? What is it triggering? And can I change it? If I can't, let it go. It's not my energy to hold. And that reminder has been crucial to me because when we realize we can't control it and we can let it go, we release way more than we think we do.
Someone listening who recognizes themselves completely the pleaser, the fixer, the one who has to control, exhausted by it, certain it's just who they are at this point. What's the first move towards seeing it as an adaptation instead, something they can actually work with?
Start with a lot of the healing journey starts with loving yourself. So a lot of it comes with the small baby steps, whether that's high fiving yourself in the morning in the mirror and giving yourself a little pep talk, or writing on your mirror every morning when you look in the mirror and you're brushing your teeth. You're going to have a great day. You're beautiful. You're smart. You're energetic. Whatever it is you need to tell yourself to rewire those patterns that you've been conditioned with. For me, when I wake up in the morning, I thank God that I've woken up and the day that I'm about to have. I then name three things that I'm grateful for because a lot of times we forget to start our day with positivity. Positivity attracts positivity, negativity attracts negativity. What we surround ourselves with is what we are. And our brain is all about being able to be rewired. It's full of pathways. So when we're conditioned a certain way, we have all those grooves, they're like the rut in the highway. And then when you're trying to rewire, it is the speed bump that you got to go over. So you kind of got to regroove that and make it into a rut. And by telling yourself those positive things every morning and thanking the universe or God or whoever you subscribe to just for the day, you're starting your day on a positive note. And then, you go into the bathroom and you see a great note reminding you that you are capable, you are hardworking, you aren't your patterns, you're not the messages your parents told you. That for me was the small steps because you can't just jump right in and be like, okay, I'm working out, I'm going to yoga classes or whatever because you system overload. And you need to start with those small little baby steps to remind yourself of who you truly are. And like I mentioned earlier, if you don't love yourself, you can't love other people the way they need to be. And if you don't respect yourself, how do you expect anybody else to respect you? So it starts with self respect and self love. And that starts with the messaging that you're telling yourself. And then from there, I started making sure that I was doing exercise daily. To me, that was something that helped with my mental health tremendously was being able to exercise and just kind of release all the energy because we often store that anxiety in our bodies and then it affects our health. But if we can release that, whether it's journaling, exercise, singing out loud to music, you know, reading a book, whatever it is that kind of calms your nervous system and brings you joy.
I love that. I think that's very much to the point, and especially for what would you say for the person who feels like their whole personality is built out of survival patterns? What do you want them to understand?
You're not your pattern and your personality can change. Your character is who you are. Your reputation is who people think you are. And when somebody tells you something every day of your life, if, you know, they look at you and say, you're a worrier, you're an overthinker, you start to believe, okay, I'm a worrier and I'm an overthinker. And you develop that personality, but that's not truly who you are. And we often forget we get to choose who we are. We get to choose our personality. We get to choose. Are you going to be a good person? Are you going to be kind, humble, generous, outgoing? Are you an introvert or an extrovert? Are you physically fit or not physically fit? Do you like comics or not comics? Everything in life is a choice, and we don't have to be that. And a lot of people that don't have support forget that they don't have to be something somebody told them, that it is okay to think for themselves and it is okay to be whoever they want to be. We are all entitled to be who we want to be and authentically be who we want to be.
Where can people find you and your books?
Both of my books, which are called This Is Me, and the other one is called Dig Deep Shit. And the Dig Deep Shit is a workbook. This Is Me is my memoir, can both be found on Amazon, worldwide on Amazon. I can also be found on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok, sorry, and Threads. And it's life.rewired.sherry. I am also on Linktree as well for anybody that would like to book an appointment. And on Linktree, it is Life Rewired.
Beautiful. I will link those in the show notes, and I'll make sure to link your socials. I found this really valuable myself. I think that your journey is inspiring, and dealing with a child by yourself and keeping still truthful to yourself and being able to grow and evolve, and then entering a stage where you're able to serve others in your best possible capability and ability. I think that is a lot to admire for anybody listening.
I
If
thank you
your
for your
mind,
support and I thank you for your time today.
thank you. If your mind is loud and your body never quite settles, that is also the work I do inside BreathX Collective and one on one with a few people. Feel free to reach out. The links are also in the show notes. This was Feel Safe in Your Body. I'm Victor Goenka. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. And thank you, Sherry.